Are you worried that sagging and the lines on your face continue to advance with the years? Today, I am going to reveal to you the secret of unflavored gelatin, how to take it step by step so that the skin looks firmer, with better elasticity, and with an appearance of less pronounced lines. Because yes, unflavored gelatin can be an interesting complement within skincare, but the problem is that most people are using it incorrectly, and that is why they do not see results. Let's begin. The majority of people buy gelatin, start with good intentions, but do not understand how it really works in the body. Here I tell you some cases. For example, Marta wrote to me something that caught my attention because it is a more common case than it seems. She had been drinking flavored gelatin every night for months, convinced that that habit was going to help improve the appearance of her skin. She did it very consistently. She prepared the dessert, let it cool, and every night before going to sleep, she ate it like a small sweet treatment, thinking she was taking care of her skin from the inside. However, weeks passed, then months, and she saw no real change, neither more firmness, nor less sagging, nor a visible improvement in the texture of her skin. What is curious is that the problem was not her discipline, nor her consistency, nor even the amount of time she had been doing it. The problem was something much more basic and that almost nobody explains. The type of gelatin she was using and the way her body actually processes it. Because here, there is something key you must understand. Not all gelatin is the same, even though in the supermarket, they all seem the same. The flavored gelatin in a box, the one that is prepared as a traditional dessert, normally comes accompanied by large amounts of sugar, artificial flavorings, colorings, and other additives that do not contribute anything to the goal of improving the skin. In addition, the proportion of usable, real protein is relatively low if we compare it with what the body needs for structural processes, such as the maintenance of collagen. This means that although the person believes they are taking gelatin, in reality, they are mainly consuming a sweet dessert, not a specific nutritional support for the skin. And if there is also insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, or simply an unbalanced diet, that type of product can even go in the opposite direction of what is being worked. Is why it is so important to make a clear distinction. What is needed in these cases is not dessert gelatin, but unflavored gelatin, also called grenadine. It is the same protein base of animal origin, but without sugar, without colorings, without flavorings, and without interferences that alter its function. It is a much purer product, more concentrated, and more suitable when the goal is to support internal processes related to tissues, such as the skin. This type of gelatin can be easily found in supermarkets, baking stores, bakeries, local markets, and even pharmacies in some countries. It is not something rare or difficult to find. The real problem is not access, but the lack of knowledge about which one is the correct one. Now here comes the most important part that almost nobody explains clearly. It is not only about the type of gelatin, but about how the body actually uses it. Gelatin is not a ready-to-use collagen as many people imagine. In reality, it is an incomplete protein that once it reaches the digestive system is broken down into smaller units called amino acids, mainly glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. These amino acids do not automatically turn into skin collagen. Instead, They enter a more complex process where the body decides how to use them according to its priority needs. And here is the critical point. If that process is not properly supported, the body does not take full advantage of its structural potential. That is why the way it is consumed matters so much. It is not just taking gelatin. It is about creating the conditions so that the organism can actually use those amino acids in the synthesis of its own collagen. If it is consumed incorrectly or without the necessary cofactors, the process becomes less efficient, and a significant part of the potential benefit is simply lost along the digestive pathway or used for other functions that are less visible for the skin. Before continuing, write to me in the comments if you usually consume unflavored gelatin and how often. Let me know in the comments. All right, I will tell you the story of Doña Elena, a 72-year-old woman who lives in Monterrey and who, like many people, had integrated a habit that seemed completely logical to her. For years, she consumed gelatin almost daily, convinced that that small gesture could help improve the condition of her skin over time. But there was a detail that changed everything and that she had not considered. She always prepared it as a common dessert. She used the sugary versions with flavorings and followed the traditional preparation without making any specific adjustment. For her, it was simply something sweet after lunch or before going to bed, a pleasant habit, but without a truly focused intention on the skin. Over time, the result was the expected one, but not the one she was looking for. Her skin continued showing loss of firmness with progressive sagging and increasingly deeper lines. And most importantly, she felt she was doing something good, when in reality, that habit was not optimized for the goal she had in mind. The change came unexpectedly when her granddaughter shared information that opened a different perspective for her. She explained that it was not just about consuming gelatin, but about understanding what type she was using and how it should be correctly integrated for it to make sense within a more functional approach. From that moment on, Doña Elena did something simple but key. She stopped using dessert gelatin and started using unflavored gelatin. She eliminated the sugar, avoided added ingredients, and adjusted the way she prepared it in order to integrate it more appropriately into her daily routine. She also began to combine it better within her overall diet instead of treating it as an isolated food. There was nothing complicated, no expensive products, no extreme changes, just a shift in approach. And what is interesting is that within a few weeks, she began to notice different sensations. It was not a dramatic or immediate change, but it was noticeable for her. Her skin felt less rough, with a more flexible texture and a general sensation of greater hydration from within. The most striking thing of all is that she did not spend more money. She was still buying something very similar, but now she was using it in a smarter way. Subscribe to the channel if you want more important tips about skincare. All right, before giving you the step-by-step, I need to explain something key so you understand the why and not just the what. Because this is where most people get lost and end up doing things without visible results. Gelatin contains amino acids such as glycine and proline, which the body can use in tissue maintenance processes, including the skin, tendons, and other connective structures that naturally tend to weaken over time. These amino acids are not magic, but they are part of the basic building blocks that the organism needs to support and repair different internal structures. But here comes the point that almost nobody mentions with enough clarity. In order for the body to better use those amino acids in processes related to the formation and maintenance of collagen, it needs an essential cofactor that is often underestimated: vitamin C. Without vitamin C, collagen synthesis does not work optimally because this vitamin directly participates in the biochemical reactions that stabilize and structure collagen fibers once they are being formed. In other words, it is not enough to have the materials, the amino acids. You also need the assembly process to be working correctly. It is like having the bricks, but not having the cement, nor the tools, nor the worker to place them in the right position. Everything is available, but the structure is not built efficiently. And this is important to understand in depth because the skin does not depend on a single isolated nutrient or on a single food, but on a complex and continuous biological system that is constantly renewing itself. Collagen, for example, is not something static. The body degrades it and synthesizes it again all the time. And that balance is what largely determines skin firmness, elasticity, and resistance. When that balance starts to change with age, it does not happen overnight. It is a progressive process influenced by factors such as the natural decrease in collagen production, the reduction in the quality of connective tissue, sun exposure, accumulated oxidative stress, and also daily nutrition. That is why over the years, the skin can become thinner, less elastic, and more prone to sagging or the formation of more pronounced lines. The loss of skin firmness with age is not just an aesthetic issue, but a visible manifestation of deeper internal changes in the structure of connective tissue. And this is where many people get confused because they look for external solutions only in creams or superficial treatments, when an important part of the process happens from within. Tell me the word protocol if you are ready to start it from today. Now, yes, let's go with the complete protocol, but I want you to understand it as something much deeper than a simple list of steps. It is not a quick recipe or an isolated trick, but a structured system that follows a fairly clear internal logic where each action has a specific reason. And this is where people who do it mechanically are truly separated from those who apply it with understanding and consistency. Step 1. The correct choice. The first thing is to precisely identify the type of gelatin you are going to use, because this detail conditions absolutely the entire process. You must look for unflavored gelatin or pure gelatin and completely avoid versions that include sugar, colorings, flavorings, or any type of additive. This is not a superficial detail or an aesthetic preference, but a factor that directly modifies the quality and purpose of the product. When you add sugar or flavorings, you are no longer dealing with a functional ingredient focused on structural support of the organism, but with a product designed mainly for recreational consumption where the goal is taste and not biological contribution. The cleaner, simpler, and more minimal the ingredient is, the more control you have over what you are actually introducing into your body, especially when the objective is related to internal processes of maintenance, repair, and regeneration of tissues such as the skin, tendons, and connective tissue in general. Step 2. Correct hydration. This step is often underestimated because it seems like a technical detail without importance, but in reality, it directly influences how the organism will later process the product. You should never mix gelatin directly into hot liquids, since heat can alter its initial structure, affect its uniform hydration, and modify its behavior when it is integrated with other foods. The correct way is to take approximately 1 tablespoon, between 10 and 15 grams, and place it in a glass of cold water. Then it is left to rest for a few minutes until it fully absorbs the liquid and forms a homogeneous gel-like texture. This previous process is not decorative. It is functional because it allows the gelatin to go through a phase of activation before being consumed or added to other drinks. Once properly hydrated, you can easily integrate it into coffee, tea, broths, or smoothies, since at that point, its structure is already stable, uniform, and much easier to incorporate without altering the main beverage. Step 3, the ideal timing. Many people choose to take it in the morning on an empty stomach because at that moment, the digestive system is relatively free of interference and can process nutrients more efficiently. However, this should not be interpreted as a strict or absolute rule. If taking it on an empty stomach feels uncomfortable, causes heaviness, or simply does not fit your routine, you can consume it before a light meal without any problem. It can even be adapted to different schedules depending on the person, since the truly determining factor is not the exact time of day, but the consistent repetition of the habit over time. In processes related to the skin and connective tissue, regularity carries much more weight than any isolated timing detail. Step 4, the key enhancer, vitamin C. This is one of the most important points of the protocol, and at the same time, one of the most ignored or misunderstood. You can obtain vitamin C through natural foods such as oranges, kiwi, strawberries, or lemon, or you can use a supplement if you are looking for greater practicality or control of the daily dose. Its role is not accessory or secondary. It acts as an essential cofactor in multiple biochemical reactions that allow collagen fibers within connective tissue to be stabilized, organized, and strengthened. Without an adequate amount of vitamin C, the process loses efficiency even if the rest of the protocol is executed correctly. That is why it should not be seen as an optional complement, but as a structural piece of the system at the same level of importance as gelatin itself within the overall approach. Step 5, the correct amount. In most cases, a daily dose between 10 and 15 grams is sufficient, which is approximately equivalent to 1 well-measured tablespoon. Here it is essential to break a very common belief, thinking that increasing the dose will accelerate the results. The human body does not work in a linear way in this type of processes. It is not a system where more quantity automatically means more effect, but a system regulated by physiological limits, absorption capacity, metabolism, and the real needs of the organism. That is why maintaining a stable, consistent, and moderate dose is usually much more effective than trying to double or triple the amount without a real basis. In this type of strategy, precision outweighs exaggeration. Step 6, continuity. This is without a doubt the point that determines the final result more than any other. The skin does not respond immediately because its internal structures have slow, progressive, and cumulative renewal cycles. Collagen and connective tissue are not rebuilt in a matter of days, but through weeks of constant repetition of the same nutritional stimuli. This is where most people fail. They start with motivation, but give up too early because they expect visible changes in a short time. However, real biological processes do not work under that logic of immediacy, but under principles of gradual adaptation, where results appear when the body has had enough time to consistently reorganize its internal structures. Now, 3 mistakes that completely destroy the effectiveness of the process. The first is using dessert gelatin, believing it has the same effect, when in reality its composition is oriented toward recreational consumption and not toward a functional support of the organism. The second is omitting vitamin C, which significantly reduces the efficiency of the reactions involved in collagen formation. And the third is lack of consistency, meaning abandoning the process before the body has had enough time to adapt. Frequently asked questions. Is unflavored gelatin the same as gelatin? Yes, it is the same base product with different names depending on the country or the manufacturer. Can it be taken every day? Yes, in fact, daily regularity is what allows the process to have biological coherence. Can it be mixed with coffee? Yes, as long as the gelatin has been properly hydrated beforehand. And now I leave you a 30-day plan designed so that the body does not feel forced, but instead adapts progressively. During the first 2 weeks, the main objective is not to see external changes, but to consolidate the daily habit. Gelatin plus vitamin C without interruptions. In weeks 3 and 4, the exact same habit is maintained, but a more complete nutritional reinforcement is added with protein sources such as eggs, fish, or yogurt, as well as light walks, since movement also influences connective tissue health by promoting circulation and nutrient delivery. Now, 3 mistakes that completely destroy the effectiveness of the process and that in practice are what explain why many people do not see any type of result despite doing everything right. The first is using dessert gelatin, believing it has the same effect when in reality its composition is oriented toward recreational consumption and not toward a functional support of the organism. This mistake is deeper than it seems because it does not only involve a difference in ingredients, but a difference in purpose. While one is designed to provide flavor, sweetness, and immediate pleasure, the other is used as a simple protein base within a structural approach. Confusing both things causes the body to receive a completely different stimulus than expected. The second mistake is omitting vitamin C, which significantly reduces the efficiency of the reactions involved in collagen formation. This is not an optional recommendation, but a key biochemical factor that acts as a cofactor in specific processes within connective tissue. When this element is absent or insufficient, the organism may receive the amino acids, but it does not properly optimize their use in structural synthesis. In other words, the system continues to function, but it does so in a less efficient way, like an incomplete process or one limited in its capacity to respond. The third mistake is lack of consistency, meaning abandoning the process before the body has had enough time to adapt. This point is critical because the biology of connective tissue does not respond to isolated stimuli, but to repeated patterns over time. Many people start with high motivation, but when they do not see immediate changes, they interrupt the process just before the most important internals adaptations begin to appear. In these cases, the problem is not the method, but the premature interruption of it. And now I leave you a 30-day plan designed so that the body does not feel forced or subjected to abrupt changes, but instead enters a process of progressive, gradual adaptation that is much more sustainable over time. The idea here is not to accelerate results or seek immediate transformations, but to create a stable foundation that the organism can recognize, accept, and integrate as part of its daily functioning. In the first week, the main objective is simply to establish the pattern without internal negotiation. That is, the body is still not adapted to this new stimulus, so the most important thing is strict daily repetition. Every day the same process is carried out. Gelatin plus vitamin C, without exceptions, without changes, without seeking perfection, but with absolute consistency. In this initial stage, the organism still does not understand the new habit, but it begins to register that this stimulus is repeated frequently. It is an initial adaptation phase where the most important thing is not the result, but the constant signal being sent to the biological system. In the second week, the habit already starts to feel more natural, less forced, and more automatic. Here the body has already begun to recognize repetition as something stable within the daily routine. However, this phase is still critical because it is where many people begin to relax and make mistakes such as skipping days or modifying the process. Therefore, in this second week, the idea of maintaining exactly the same scheme without variations is reinforced. The goal is to consolidate regularity until it no longer requires conscious effort. It is at this point that the habit truly begins to stabilize at both a behavioral and physiological level. During these first 2 weeks, the most important thing is to understand that the body does not respond to isolated impulses, but to repeated patterns over time. It is in constant repetition that the organism begins to interpret that this stimulus is part of its usual environment, and therefore it progressively starts integrating it into its internal processes. Although there are still no visible changes in the skin, internally the foundation is already being built so that the following phases have a greater impact. In weeks 3 and 4, the exact same base habit is maintained without modifications because stability is what allows the process to deepen. However, in this stage, a more complete nutritional reinforcement is introduced, incorporating higher biological quality protein sources such as eggs, fish, or natural yogurt. This is not an arbitrary change, but a strategy to complement the amino acid profile needed for the body's different tissues, especially those that require constant renewal. By combining different protein sources, the availability of essential nutrients is expanded, which allows more complete support for the body's structural processes. In this phase, the organism is no longer only recognizing the habit, but also beginning to work with a more balanced nutritional environment. Additionally, in this second stage, light walks or gentle physical activity are also incorporated, not as an intense workout, but as a constant and natural movement stimulus. This is important because movement has a direct impact on connective tissue health. It improves blood circulation, facilitates the transport of nutrients to the tissues, and promotes better cellular oxygenation. All of this creates a more favorable internal environment for the body's natural processes of maintenance, repair, and balance. Share this video on WhatsApp with friends and family who want to take care of their skin. Discover the worst mistakes older adults make when applying creams. Click here. See you in the next video.